in Baltimore, some football. We'll get a bunch of football conversation, but certainly for this week, we are deep in the throes of all things drama as it relates to the Baltimore Orioles and their woeful start to the second half of the season and the Chicago Cubs kicking their butts and where this trading deadline is now that the trading has become a little more fast and furious. We welcome in longtime baseball author. You know his work here at WNST through ESPN and many, many others. I know him as the guy I went out to Portland to have some pretty good Asian chow and a couple of adult beverages. We welcome Rob Nyer, one of our defending champs, back on to talk baseball and summer and trading deadline on the backside of the All-Star break. Rob, the Orioles, boy, they've fallen and they can't get up, man.
Yeah, I think if you're the optimistic sort, you can look at this weekend and say, oh, you know what, we've lost to a good team, and because it's a bizarre season, we're still only 5.5 games out in the wild card standings. But realistically, the Orioles have the worst run differential in the American League, and they have fallen, and it's not often that you get up when you've got that sort of run differential in the middle of July. So I think that the talk about trading some pretty good players, I think that suggests that the management has a pretty realistic take on the situation.
Well, and the Machado thing will come up, and we've been talking about it around here for about 6 or 8 weeks, and I didn't think we'd be talking about a guy that looks like he might hit 225 this year. He might stink all year long. He might not get out of this. And, you know, the value at shortstop versus third base versus where he would be inside the division, where they wouldn't deal him to the Yankees or the Red Sox no matter what over the next 2 weeks, which is kind of crazy in my opinion. We learned on Sunday through Ken Rosenthal that the Orioles will not do business with the Washington Nationals and maybe cost themselves an opportunity to get some prospects from that organization. So it is sort of weird times around here, and I don't know how much the Orioles can really improve their team in regard to dealing Brock or Britton or Givens or O'Day, who has scuffled and has a big contract as well. But, you know, certainly into the market to do that the next 2 weeks. If you're going to go half in, why keep Machado? Why is he the chosen one? And what leads anyone to believe that he's actually going to want to be on this team in 18 months?
Well, I think that's a fair question. The problem, you know, you're always in the worst position. This is always the worst position to be in, where you have the one player that you could certainly get the most from is struggling. So his value right now is probably as low as it's ever been, and unless he's hurt or something, maybe it's as low as it'll be for a long time, because I have to think that if he's healthy, he's going to bounce back. He's going to have a big second half. He's going to have a big 2018, et cetera. So it's
everyone believes that. It's universal, right? I mean, there is universal belief in him, so much so that if he were hitting 292 right now, I don't know that the prospect exchange would be any different if you want him, you know, and the Red Sox clearly going to go in a different direction here, but, you know, there were teams willing to give away what it would take to get a Manny Machado. I mean, the Red Sox did it for sale last offseason, right? So why not go fleece an organization? Why not?
Look, I agree if you think you're not going to wind up signing him long term, and there's a big package out there, absolutely. It's incredibly difficult for an organization to trade away a 25-year-old superstar or star.
But the A's in Tampa do it all the time, literally, right?
I would. The A's haven't traded away any 25-year-old superstars. That hasn't happened. Josh Donaldson was probably, 28, 29 when they traded him. The Rays still have Evan Longoria. I mean, that's a difficult thing to do. But in the Rays case, they were able to lock up Longoria literally the moment he joined the Major League roster. He was locked up to a huge multi-year deal that took him for another, I don't know what it was, 7 or 8 years. So this is not that situation. In fact, we've seen Machado came up, was an everyday player at 19 and played 156 games at 20. So that obviously started the clock ticking on his free agency very early. The same sort of situations as the Angels have with Mike Trout and the Nationals have with Bryce Harper. And it does complicate things because it's just psychologically it's difficult to let go of a guy who's still before his prime. It's one thing if he's 29 or 30 or 31, like the Cardinals and Albert Pujols a few years ago.
But if they're not going to re-sign him, I mean, to your point, if they're not going to re-sign him, and I think there's even a bigger question here, Rob, is, 2 weeks ago they are parading around as though they're in a race here. Now it's becoming more clear and less murky that they're not in a race. The question then would become, how do they win the World Series next year?
That's right, and there's no reason to think that this team is going to be significantly better next year. Where are those arms going to come from? One would assume that the bats will bounce back, and there's no such thing as a sure thing. But I think that you have look. If you're running this organization, you have, given the decisions that you've made in the past, you have to assume that Chris Davis and Adam Jones, and for that matter, Mark Trumbo, are going to play better than they have, and Manny Machado as well. So, if you're running the organization, you have to almost assume that you're going to score more runs next year. But it's not all clear how you become particularly optimistic about the starting pitching, given the disaster that the rotation has been this season.
He is Rob Neyer. He is the writer of all writings. You can follow him out at Rob Neyer on Twitter. That's Neyer. And we're talking all things baseball. It all is sort of interconnected, though, right? I mean, if you're peddling relief pitchers and the Nationals are now no longer on the market for that, you have taken bidders away. If you're not taking offers on Manny Machado at all, which I think is foolish, then, I think the market's a little wider this year, and I think for the starting pitching and for the Cubs to jump in on Quintana early, this isn't unusual. I mean, I remember a time where all of these deals seemingly happened in the last 36 hours before the deadline. That's kind of gone, and literally over the last half a decade, we started to see these deals start to percolate even before the All-Star break in the case of Pomerantz last year. But, now that we're up on it, I think everything's fair game over the next 2 weeks. Any moment, any day, any time, deals can be made and will be made, right?
Of course. Teams are, I think you're right, I think they are more aggressive well before the deadline, which makes sense because, look, if you really want a guy to help get you to the playoffs, wouldn't you rather have him for 3 months instead of 2? I mean, the math is simple. Now, the reason you hold off is because, the team who's got that guy you want thinks they might be able to get more for him if they wait. And that's why you see, I think, for example, the Cubs, I think they just blew away the White Sox with their offer for Quintana.
Well, that's what you have to do when you want to win. I mean, it's no different than in the offseason. I always say this about the Orioles signing players. You know how you sign the best players? You give them the most money. You overbid. Literally, that's how it works for all of this. And
well, that's right. And I think that the Cubs were particularly motivated in the case of Quintana because he's not just a rental. They have him next year as well.
And so, why not get 4 more starts out of him before the deadline, right?
Get the 4 more this season and then get 30-some more next season as well. You're going to get that because you picked him up before somebody else did. The market for starting pitchers this winter is, as I recall, not particularly good. So instead of targeting pitchers in free agency next winter, go ahead and grab him now, and you'll have him next season.
Well, I guess for the market itself and where these teams are going, so many teams sort of teetering on it, and a lot of newcomers. I mean, what are the Minnesota Twins going to do? I don't know. What are the Kansas City Royals going to do? Well, I know they had a parade. They don't owe anyone anything. We got the Texas Rangers coming in here this week. A lot of these teams that are sort of bandying about. And then there's the Arizonas and the Colorados and the Houstons that are kind of new to the party, and we know they're going to be in the party. Now it's how good can we get between now and October when we need to play our best baseball in a very, very small window.
Right, and what's interesting about this season is that the American League and National League are so bizarrely different in terms of their standings, at least the wild card standings, where In the American League, the Angels are 46 and 49. They're 3.5 games out in the wild card standings.
I don't think they're real, but they might think they're real.
They might, and they might look a lot more real, say, a week from now. Who knows? They might be plus 500 in a week, and then they look very real.
Well, after what the Rangers did 2 years ago,
that's right.
I would never bet against any of these teams in the way they're constructed, but I have watched the Orioles in the run. That there are some sort of vital signs about how relevant you are, and it probably does speak a lot to how's your pitching been lately, right?
I think so. There's just no reason to expect a great deal of improvement. And even if the Orioles play better, which I think they will, it'd be almost impossible for the starting pitching to be this bad for another 2.5 months. There's just too many deficiencies to catch all the teams that are ahead of them. I think they'll play better. I just don't think it'll be enough because ultimately, as poorly as the wild card contenders have played this season, the Twins are a game and a half out at around 500. Same with the Royals. Same with the Mariners. Ultimately, it's going to take 85 to 90 wins, and if you do the math, it's really hard to see how the Orioles get to between 85 and 90. In the National League, it's completely different, where you've got basically 3 wild card contenders, and that's it. Everybody else is way behind. For gosh sake, the Braves are technically in it.
They're in it, yeah. I don't.
And they were supposed to be one of the worst teams in the league this season.
Well, the National League race isn't going to be much fun, but I do think this race for who is going to improve and where the positioning is going to be. I mean, it's pretty obvious the Dodgers want to run away and hide, and the Nationals are going to run away and hide. But the Cubs, here they come, and here are the Brewers. Boy, the Brewers now have a little chess piece that they need to play after this Quintana deal on the Cubs side, who say they're real even though they're half dozen games back and look pretty good against the Orioles over the weekend, which was a second-half hallmark card for them, I think, to start things for Joe Madden and company. But the Cubs have sort of put their stake in the ground, and I think this Cubs-Brewers thing could be very, very interesting.
Oh, I think so. I think that is aside from seeing how many games the Dodgers can win, easily the most interesting story in the National League is the Brewers, and can the Brewers hold off the Cubs? Look, nobody should be shocked if the Brewers wind up 6 or 7 games behind the Cubs at the end of the season. And it's been a tremendous season for the Brewers. Nobody had them anywhere near the top of the standings, and they're probably better than we thought they were.
Everybody just thinks they're going to fade, right?
Well, I think it's reasonable to think that. That doesn't mean that they won't be in the playoffs. They've got a pretty solid lead over the teams in the wild card standings. And look, one of those teams is the Diamondbacks, and they weren't supposed to be very good either. The other team in that group is the Cubs, the Rockies, not supposed to be good before the season. So basically, you've got the Brewers and the Rockies and the Diamondbacks and the Cubs sort of fighting for 3 playoff spots, and so you can't say that the Brewers won't do it when there are other teams in exactly the same position as they are, except the Brewers have the good fortune of also having a decent lead in their division. So the Brewers have 2 good chances to win, whereas really the Diamondbacks and Rockies, because they're so far behind the Dodgers, they have 1 chance. They have to get the wild card.
He is Rob Neyer, writer of all writings and baseball aficionado. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Rob Neyer. That's Neyer. He is, of course, one of our baseball defending champs around here at WNST.net for a long, long time. Rob, I'm going to take this Orioles thing even a step further with management. And as you know, I have been writing as well as reading the Peter Principles here at WNST, and everybody will get a full dose of that next week as I put the book not only online but also out onto the radio airwaves here. In the case of Peter Angelos and in the case of the unorthodox nature of this specific franchise, every franchise sort of has its quirks, right? I mean, who's to say where the Tigers are going to be with no Mike Ilitch around, and who's to say what the financial constraints are going to be? I really thought that the Yankees, who have all the money and all the talent, were going to run away a little bit more earlier this year. A lot of folks thought they would back up. I think you may have been among them 5 or 6 weeks ago. They have certainly backed up, and it's almost harder to take them seriously right now now that, to your point, 10 days from now, 2 weeks from now, who knows what teams will think. But, boy, the Yankees got off to the kind of start and have the kind of war chest there that you thought they would be a bigger player in the trading deadline. But maybe they're not believing as much as they were a month ago. It's been a horrendous month of baseball for them.
It has. The one saving grace for the Yankees is that leaving out the Astros, who are off the charts, the Yankees still have the second-best run differential in the whole league. So they've actually underperformed a little bit. You could argue quite a bit when you compare their record to their runs scored and runs allowed. If I'm the Yankees, I look at that record and what's happened in the last month or so, and I'm discouraged, but I also look at the run differential and say, you know what? We're not a joke. This hasn't been a fluke. Those first 2 months were not a fluke. We're a pretty good team. Now, when you're missing one of your best starting pitchers, that equation maybe changes a little bit, but the wild card is so wide open for anybody who just plays decently that I know the Yankees have publicly said that they're not going to trade a bunch of prospects. They're going to stick with the program that they've been on for the last 2 or 3 years, and I believe them. I also think that when you're looking at weak competition for a playoff spot and you're the Yankees, you have to make at least some movement toward that spot. Maybe you're not as good as the Red Sox ultimately, but you're certainly as good as the Rays. You're certainly as good as the Twins or the Mariners or the Royals. So, sure, maybe you make a few targeted moves here and there, particularly for a starting pitcher, and you see if you can get in there and maybe get lucky in October.
You one of the guys finding it hard to buy into Houston or L.A. or Washington, these teams that have really never done it before. It is going to be a fascinating postseason as this thing sort of shakes out, as well as the pennant race, which might not be as good. But there is some fresh blood rolling around in regard to a bunch of failed, disappointing operations, or never was, as in the case of Houston, that are going to get involved in this thing. We're going to have some fresh meat here, I think, in October to keep us interested. Well,
yeah, and you've got these. I don't remember seeing two super teams in one season like the Astros and the Dodgers. Now, one or both of those teams is going to settle down a little bit.
But they're both going to hit triple digits, probably.
Oh yeah, they're both certainly on target for 100 wins. The Dodgers in particular, but the Astros too. They're both really good. They're really good. And they were supposed to be really good. The Astros were supposed to win this season. In fact, they were supposed. You probably remember it was 4 years ago that the SI put the Astros on the cover and said, "You're 2017 World Series champions." So they're right on track. Talk about a plan that's worked out. And the Dodgers, of course, have been in this situation as, if not the best, one of the best teams in the league for 3 or 4 years in a row. So they're hardly a surprise. The only thing that's surprising is just how incredible their record is, especially in the last 2 months. And by the way, missing Clayton Kershaw much of that time. I mean, this is just a tremendous organization having a tremendous season.
Rob Neyer writes all things baseball and life at Rob Neyer out on Twitter. He's one of our defending champs and baseball pals here as well, man. Summer heating up. We got football coming around here. I know you guys are having a good time in the summertime out there in Portland, Oregon. Always great to catch up with you, Rob. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, I love coming on. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Rob Neyer talking seams with us, and I didn't even get to home runs and juiced balls and the sale of the Marlins and all that other nonsense we were covering last week. Just now, it's all like, what are they going to do? What are we going to do here in August and September besides watch football? And obviously the Machado thing, as predicted, they're not going to deal him. Now, whether they should and where the conversation is, that's what we're going to be talking about here, and certainly be talking about that for the next couple of years if he slips out the back door and becomes a Philly or a Yankee or whatever it's going to be 18 months from now. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day, as you can find The Peter Principles, my book on all things Peter Angelos and the ownership of the Orioles over the last quarter of a century. I've witnessed it all. It's been mostly bad. I was going to say the good, the bad, and the ugly, but there's been a little bit of good. There's been a lot of bad. There's been a ton of ugly, and it's all out there. So you'll hear it next week as well here. You can also email me, nasty at WNST.net. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And if there are any movements, relief pitchers, deals with the Orioles, the Ravens, as they get going next week, you'll get it all first on the WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by our friends at Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.